Hello, thoughtful viewers, and welcome to Animal World, Our Co-Inhabitants. Why do we love some types of animals and treat them as family members, and willingly consume the flesh of others? On today's program, we'll meet Dr. Melanie Joy of the United States, a social psychologist, university professor, and vegan who has spent nearly a decade studying the psychology behind a belief system she calls carnism, which conditions us to eat some animals but not others. Dr. Joy holds a master's degree from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, USA, and a PhD in psychology from Saybrook Graduate School, USA, and is currently a professor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, USA. She has written extensively on psychology, animal advocacy, and social justice, and is the leading expert on the ideology behind meat production and consumption. In her latest book, Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows, An Introduction to Carnism, Dr. Joy examines the inconsistent, illogical, mental, and emotional links between humans and animals. The following scenario illustrates the paradox of carnism. Imagine your new neighbors have invited you to dinner, and rich aromas, laughter, and conversation fill the air.
He'll never forget to read the fine print again.
It's delicious, Bob. Thank you. I've never tasted anything like it.
Tell us, how do you make this?
Sure. First of all, you start with 3 pounds golden retriever, well marinated, and then you take
What did you say? Golden retriever?
Oh, I forgot. You are Americans with your love affair of dogs. But you look like you saw a ghost. I'm just kidding. That is nothing but plain old beef. What, you're not going to eat it now?
It's a bit hard to get that image out of my mind. Golden retriever, a dog, an animal on my plate. It's disgusting. It's not normal.
As a young adult, Dr. Joy had a profound realization about the impact of her food choices.
I was born into a family that ate meat, and for much of my life I ate meat. And when I became 23, I was exposed to information about how animals are turned into meat. And I know I had been exposed to that information before then, and for whatever reason it hadn't fully hit me, it hadn't fully sunk in. And I decided to stop eating meat because of that. And I was fascinated by how my consciousness so radically changed, how what had once been appetizing and delicious to me could have become disgusting. I became vegetarian about 20 years ago and vegan about 10 years ago, and I made the choice to stop eating animals because of ethical concerns. I didn't want to contribute to animal suffering. It's been the healthy choice for not only the animals and the planet, but also for my body. I can say that today at 43, I feel and am healthier than I was 20 years ago at 23.
Curious about her change in consciousness, Melanie Joy did extensive research on meat eating and vegetarianism for several years.
So I decided that I wanted to learn about the phenomenon, the psychology of meat eating, what had happened to me, and why it was that it took so long for this transformation to happen to me when I had been exposed to information on animal cruelty before then. So I became enrolled in a doctoral program to study social psychology, and I interviewed people. I interviewed meat eaters and butchers and meat cutters. I also interviewed vegans and vegetarians. I wanted to understand their relationship to eating meat, how it was possible for humane people to participate in inhumane practices without even realizing what they were doing. What I found was that there are a set of psychological and social mechanisms that prevent us from connecting with the truth of our experience when we eat meat. These defense mechanisms are organized to essentially block our empathy, to block our awareness or our consciousness, and to block our feelings when we eat meat. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. This is not just an individual phenomenon. This happens because we live in a social system that's a dominant, widespread, entrenched belief system or ideology that socializes us to look at the world in a particular way. It shapes our attitudes toward animals and the meat we eat. And I call this ideology carnism.
What are some of the ways that people mentally disconnect themselves from the meat that is on their plate?
So some of these defenses include, for instance, avoidance. Don't tell me that, you'll ruin my meal. Or denial. Animals don't really suffer when they're being raised and killed for meat production. Or what I refer to in my book as the 3 ends of justification. Finding a good enough reason for engaging in a behavior so we don't feel as bad about it. The 3 ends of justification have been used to justify virtually all violent ideologies in the history of humankind. In the case of carnism, it's eating meat is normal, natural, and necessary.
Dr. Joy's research led to many other discoveries, and when we return, she'll share more of her astute conclusions. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television.
Carnism is why we typically don't envision the animal when we sit down, for instance, to a plate of beef, chicken, or pork. It's also why we can't help but envision the animal when, for instance, we're served golden retriever, swan, or guinea pig.
Welcome back to Animal World, Our Co-Inhabitants, as we continue our interview with Dr. Melanie Joy, a social psychologist and university professor who has spent nearly a decade examining the belief system she calls carnism, which conditions humans to eat the flesh of some animals but not others. Through her research, Dr. Joy has come to understand why normally compassionate, caring people can participate in the inhumane practice of meat eating.
Carnism is essentially the opposite of veganism. We typically only name those ideologies that fall outside of the norm. Vegetarianism, it was originally named the Pythagorean diet, after the mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras. But we haven't named carnism until now.
According to Dr. Joy, a clear distinction exists between carnivores and carnists.
Some meat eaters refer to themselves as carnivores. A carnivore is an animal, human or non-human, that needs to eat meat in order to survive. I think it's really important that we recognize that when meat eating is not a necessity, it's a choice, and choices always stem from beliefs. So carnism reflects a belief system, an ideology.
Why have many people remained unaware of this paradoxical belief system?
One of the primary ways that systems like carnism keep themselves alive is through remaining invisible. So the victims of carnism are invisible. The animals that we eat are kept out of sight and out of mind. And the system itself is invisible, and it stays invisible by not being named. If we don't name it, we can't talk about it. If we can't talk about it, we can't challenge it. So Why We Love Dogs is not a book simply about why we shouldn't eat meat, but about why we do eat meat. What is it that happens socially and psychologically that enables rational people to participate in irrational behaviors, or humane people to support inhumane practices without even realizing what they're doing? The goal of my book is to make the invisible visible. It's to pull the mask off of the system. The system, it needs to stay in hiding in order to ensure the continued support of people who would likely choose not to support it if they realized what was really going on. In my book, I explain the specific defense mechanisms, psychological defense mechanisms and social defense mechanisms that are employed in carnism so that we can become aware of the way that we have been literally taught to think or to feel, more importantly, taught not to feel when it comes to eating meat.
In your book, you talk about our brains being wired for empathy. Mm-hmm. Could you give us an example of that?
Mm-hmm. Scientists have recently discovered mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are neurons in the brain that are activated when we are watching somebody else perform an activity. And they've found that these are the same neurons that are activated if we were performing that activity ourselves. And they found that people who were viewing an insect crawling up somebody else's legs, or people who were viewing somebody experiencing pain, the parts of their brains that would have been activated if they were doing this themselves were activated simply by watching others do this. And so what this suggests is that when we empathize with another, we literally are feeling what that other is feeling.
Why don't we have this same sense of empathy while consuming the flesh of an animal who suffered tremendously in a factory farm and was then brutally killed?
Carnism is set up to block compassionate witnessing. It's to block our empathizing with the animals that we're eating when we're eating them. And so if we are in fact wired to care, if empathy is a biologically or a natural human process, then carnism blocks us from acting in accordance with our true nature.
Based on Dr. Joy's research, coming to realize that eating meat causes immense suffering to billions of our animal friends has a powerfully constructive effect and significantly transforms one's outlook on life.
One of the reasons people choose not to become aware of the extent of animal suffering is because it's painful. Because your world changes dramatically. Your reality is never the same when you allow yourself to really connect with the reality of what's going on for so many other sentient beings in the world. And so, to some degree, life becomes more difficult in that you have to carry around a certain amount of pain with your awareness. But life also becomes more empowering because you have the opportunity to make a choice, and there's something very empowering about choosing to do your best to live in accordance with your value system.
What happens when we begin to challenge our beliefs about meat consumption? What helps us to feel empathy toward all animals? Does the violence that an employee experiences every day in a slaughterhouse have a negative psychological impact on his or her life? Dr. Melanie Joy will provide answers to these and other questions tomorrow in part 2 of a revealing interview on Animal World, Our Co-Inhabitants. For more information on Dr. Melanie Joy, please visit www.melaniejoy.org. Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows, an introduction to carnism, is available at Amazon.com. Thank you for watching today's program. Coming up next is enlightening entertainment after noteworthy news, here on Supreme Master Television. May the light of Providence shine brightly upon you.
For more details, please see www.suprememastertv.com/AW.